Picture this. Rome is not a city right now. It's a wound. The streets are too quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Funeral quiet. Doors shut, shops closed, altars smoking with desperate offerings that smell like fear. Because everyone has heard the name of the place where Rome's soul got ripped out. Cannae. A single afternoon where the Republic didn't just lose a battle. It lost the right to feel safe ever again. Fathers came home without sons. Sons came home without fathers. Most didn't come home at all. The survivors walked into Rome with empty eyes, and the city realized something terrifying. This war isn't a contest. It's a predator in human form. His name is Hannibal Barca, and Rome's worst defeat wasn't just numbers on a casualty list. It was a message. It said, I can kill you whenever I want, and you can't stop me. Now cut to a candle-lit chamber inside the city, the kind of room where decisions get made that don't leave room for mercy. A group of Roman nobles are sitting shoulder to shoulder, sweating in their togas, hearing the distant noise of a city trying not to panic. And they're doing something Rome almost never does. They're talking about surrender, not how do we win, not how do we endure, how do we live after we kneel. Then the door opens. A young man walks in, late teens, not famous yet, not the great Scipio, just a Roman with a hard stare and a sword at his hip. His name is Publius Cornelius Scipio. He listens for a moment, quietly, like he's letting them finish their own funeral speech. Then he does something so violent, so shocking, it snaps the room awake. He draws his sword, not at Hannibal, at them. He steps forward and says, "Swear it." They blink. He repeats it slower. "Swear you will never abandon Rome. Swear you will never speak surrender again." And then he adds the part that turns it from a speech into a threat. He says, "If you won't swear, I'll kill the first man who tries to leave." This isn't a scene from a movie. This was the reality of a Rome that had been traumatized into steel. Because after Cannae, Rome wasn't brave. Rome was cornered, and cornered animals don't negotiate. They bite. This brutal zero-tolerance mindset sets the stage for the final showdown. This is the Battle of Zama, the story of how Rome stopped being prey and learned to hunt the hunter. Before we dive into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy history told like a thriller, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. It genuinely blows my mind that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by the same curiosity about how humans survive and what they become when they do. That sword point oath in the candlelight proves one thing. Rome had decided no more mercy. Now here's where we need to correct a misconception. When people talk about Rome versus Hannibal, they imagine a simple story. Rome loses, Rome learns, Rome wins. Clean, comforting. But the truth is messier. Hannibal didn't just beat Rome. He infected it. He rewired how it thought. After Cannae, Rome starts doing things that would have sounded insane a decade earlier. They lower the draft age. They scrape the treasury. They melt sacred offerings. They arm men who aren't supposed to hold weapons. They stop asking what's honorable and start asking what works. And Hannibal is still in Italy for years, just living there, like a curse you can't exorcise. He wins battles, yes, but more than that, he forces Rome to wake up every morning wondering, is today the day he walks up to our walls? Now most generals would do the obvious thing. March out, fight him again, prove themselves. That's what Rome kept doing, and that's why Rome kept bleeding. Scipio does something different, something that feels almost un-Roman. He decides the way to kill a predator isn't to chase its teeth, it's to starve it. Hannibal's power doesn't come from magic, it comes from Spain, Carthage's recruiting ground, its silver, its logistics. So Scipio goes there. And he doesn't just win fights, he dismantles the machine that keeps Hannibal alive. He captures New Carthage, Carthage's key base, like a man breaking into the enemy's heart and squeezing. He fights like Hannibal fights, fast, ruthless, focused, and while he's cutting Carthage's supply lines, he's also building something even more dangerous, a reputation, because Rome needs more than a general. It needs a symbol that the nightmare can end. Then Scipio does the move that turns this war from tragedy to thriller. He doesn't stay in Spain. He crosses into Africa. He brings the war to Carthage's front door, and that forces Carthage to make the one decision it never wanted to make. They recall Hannibal. Imagine Hannibal stepping off a ship after years in Italy, older, hardened, not the hungry young genius who crossed the Alps. Now he's a veteran carrying the weight of an entire nation on his shoulders. He returns to a city that is panicked, divided, and furious, because Carthage doesn't want a strategist anymore. Carthage wants a miracle, and across the African plain, waiting for him, is the Roman who grew up under the shadow of Hannibal's slaughter, Scipio. Now, if you want to understand why Zama feels like revenge, you have to understand what it's really about. Zama isn't just Rome wins. Zama is Rome forcing Hannibal to taste his own medicine. It's psychological warfare, made physical, and the battlefield itself is chosen like a stage for an execution. Flat ground, wide space, perfect for cavalry maneuvers, perfect for the kind of encirclement Hannibal used at Cannae. Only this time, Rome is the one trying to close the ring. Now we have to talk about the numbers in the title, because people love numbers, but they don't always understand what they mean. The 5,000 Romans here isn't saying Rome only had 5,000 men total. It's about the core, the hardened nucleus of veterans and heavy infantry that Scipio relies on as his knife edge. The men who will hold when elephants hit. The men who won't blink when Hannibal tries to do what he always does. Break your mind before he breaks your body. Because Hannibal shows up with something designed to do exactly that. Elephants. And we need to kill another misconception right now. Pop culture treats war elephants like a fun gimmick, a cinematic flourish, but an elephant charge is not cool. It's a terror weapon. It's a wall of screaming muscle and tusks that turns disciplined soldiers into frightened animals. If your line breaks, you die. That's the whole point. So picture the morning of the battle. The sun is already harsh. The wind is dry. Dust clings to sweat. Men have been awake for hours, pretending they're calm while their stomachs twist themselves into knots. Because everyone here knows what's at stake. This isn't a raid. This isn't a border skirmish. This is a national verdict. On one side, Rome, tired, scarred, furious, determined to prove it is unkillable. On the other side, Carthage, desperate, cornered, trying to survive long enough to negotiate. And in the middle of it all, two men. Hannibal, the architect of Rome's nightmares. Scipio, the student who learned the nightmare's rules. Now look at the Roman line. It doesn't look like the old Roman line from the early war. No panicked mass, no clumsy rush to prove bravery. Scipio's army stands like it's been rehearsed. Because it has. You have heavy infantry in the center, men whose shields are scuffed from years of use, whose faces look older than their ages. In front of them, lighter troops, the screen, the skirmishers, men who throw javelins and darts, not meant to win the day, but meant to shape it. And on the wings, the real difference maker, cavalry. Not Roman cavalry alone, but Numidian cavalry. Fast riders from North Africa who fight like they were born on horseback, men who can turn at full speed, launch a spear, and vanish into dust before you can even raise your shield. Their leader is Massinissa, and Massinissa isn't here because he loves Rome. He's here because politics is survival. Carthage betrayed him. Carthage chose the wrong allies. Carthage backed the wrong king. Massinissa is here because he wants his throne. And Scipio is smart enough to understand something Hannibal understood his entire life. Wars are won by alliances just as often as they're won by swords. Now look at Hannibal's line. It's layered. It's intentional. It's built to absorb pain. First line, mercenaries, mixed troops from different lands, different languages, different loyalties. Not cowards, not amateurs, but they're fighting for money, reputation, and the hope that they don't get left behind when things go bad. Second line, Carthaginian citizens, men fighting because if this line fails, Carthage itself becomes a trophy. Third line, Hannibal's veterans, the Italy men, the survivors, the professionals who know what Roman discipline looks like when it cracks, and in front of all of them, the elephants, not a few, a mass, a moving wall of muscle and panic. Now here's the detail people miss. Elephants don't just kill with tusks, they kill with sound, the trumpeting, the stomping, the deep animal roar that makes your chest vibrate. It's a fear frequency, and the first time you hear it close, your brain doesn't think tactics, your brain thinks run. So Scipio does something subtle and brilliant. He doesn't pack his line tight like a normal wall. He leaves gaps, lanes, corridors, spaces that look like a mistake. If you were a young Roman seeing it for the first time, you'd probably think your general has lost his mind, because every instinct says, close ranks, lock shields, be a wall. But Scipio isn't trying to be a wall. He's trying to be a maze built for elephants. Now Hannibal gives the signal. The elephants scream, and the ground starts to shake. This is the moment where most armies become history, because your instincts betray you. Your body wants to run, your mind wants to hide, your formation wants to dissolve, and Rome has dissolved before. Cannae proved that, but Scipio has prepared for this like a man preparing for a nightmare he's had every night for a decade. As the elephants charge, Roman trumpets blast, sharp, brutal noise designed to spook them. And it works, because elephants are weapons, yes, but they are also animals. They panic, they veer, they get confused by noise and pain. Roman skirmishers move like a curtain of wasps. They throw darts, they jab with spears, they attack the soft places, eyes, trunks, flanks, not heroic, not honorable, effective. And when the beast hit the Roman line, something insane happens. They don't smash the Romans apart. They funnel into the lanes. They run forward like living, battering rams. And the Romans let them pass. Imagine the discipline it takes not to flinch when a tusk the size of your torso is rushing by you. Imagine standing so still you can feel the wind of the animal's movement and not moving an inch. Some elephants, confused and panicked by the sound, don't even hit the lanes correctly. They veer. They crash into Carthage's own side. They turn a weapon into a liability. Men in Hannibal's front rank get crushed by their own terror weapon. And that is the first psychological cut of the day. Because if your war elephants are running sideways, trampling your own men, what else can go wrong? Now the infantry collides, and this is where Zama turns ugly. Rome's front screen clashes with Hannibal's mercenaries. You can hear it. The slap of sandals on hard ground, the thunk of javelins into shields, the hiss of men breathing through clenched teeth. Then the heavy infantry steps in, and the fighting becomes a shove. Not clean sword play, a grinding crush where your world becomes the man in front of you, the shield at your cheek, the smell of sweat and iron. Hannibal's mercenaries fight hard. They're skilled. They've killed before. But they aren't fighting for a homeland they love. They're fighting for pay, pride, and survival. The Romans push them, slowly, and you can feel the mercenary lines start to wobble, like a table with one leg sinking into sand. When they begin to give ground, they do what any line does. They look back. They expect Hannibal's second line to absorb them, to open, to merge, to regroup. That's normal. That's how layered formations are supposed to work. But Hannibal's second line doesn't open. Carthage's citizen soldiers hesitate. They refuse to let battered, panicked mercenaries flood into their ranks. And suddenly, the battlefield becomes something worse than combat. It becomes a crowd disaster. Men yelling in different languages. Men trying to fall back through a line that won't let them through. Blades flashing in cramped space. Not Romans killing Carthaginians. Carthaginians killing Carthaginians, shoving, stabbing, screaming accusations. Because panic always looks for someone to blame. And Scipio sees it. He doesn't treat it as chaos. He treats it as a door cracking open. He orders the pressure increased, harder, cleaner, forward. Because the moment an enemy line starts fighting itself, your job is to make sure it never stops. The mercenaries finally break away, not retreating neatly, peeling off sideways, running along the front, escaping the pressure any way they can. They leave behind gaps. They leave behind bodies. Now Rome meets the second line. This is where the fight changes, because these are Carthaginian citizens, men defending the last fragile edge of their world. They fight stubbornly, brutally. They don't want glory. They want time. Time for something to happen. A Roman mistake, a lucky break, a miracle. And for a while, they hold. The Roman line is breathing hard now, arms burning from shield weight, hands slick with sweat, mouths dry from dust. And Hannibal is watching, because this is where he always wins. He wins when you're tired. He wins when your formation isn't crisp anymore. He wins when you start thinking about survival instead of structure. But Scipio doesn't let the structure dissolve. He uses rotation. Fresh men forward, tired men back. A controlled pulse, like a machine swapping parts before failure. And little by little, the citizen line bends. Not shattering, bending. And Hannibal lets them. Because now we reach the moment Hannibal has been waiting for. His third line, he steps forward. The veterans of Italy, the Italy men, the survivors, the professionals who know what Roman discipline looks like when it cracks. And when they move, the air changes. The Romans can feel it, even if they don't have words for it. This isn't a militia. This isn't a hired blade. This is the Hannibal line, men who have stared at Roman discipline at its best and still found ways to break it. They don't rush. They advance like a slow tide. And here's the terrifying thing about veterans. They don't look angry. They don't look afraid. They look busy. Like killing is a task they know how to do. Now Scipio sees the trap forming, because Hannibal's genius is not in the first punch. It's in the second and third. When your line is tired, when your lungs burn, when your hands shake, and then he asks you to survive again. So Scipio makes the most important decision of the battle. He doesn't keep pushing in a messy crush. He pulls his men back. He resets the line. Think about that. In the middle of a battle, after hours of violence, he chooses discipline over adrenaline. He reorganizes into a clean formation, facing Hannibal's veterans. 2 lines now. No confusion. No mercenaries in the way. No elephants. Just Rome versus Hannibal. And for a moment, it's eerily quiet, like the battlefield itself is holding its breath. Then they collide. This is not a glamorous fight. This is not heroic duels. This is mass violence at arm's length. Shields grind, spears punch, men stumble in the dust and don't get back up. Hannibal's veterans don't break. They've won too many times to panic, and Rome's core doesn't break either, because these aren't the naive conscripts of early war. These are men forged in grief, men who watched their friends disappear at Cannae and swore they'd never be trapped like that again. Now here's the part people forget about Zama. The infantry fight is only half the story. The other half is happening on the wings, because Scipio has something Hannibal doesn't. Cavalry dominance. Hannibal has horsemen, yes, but Scipio has Massinissa, and Massinissa's riders don't fight like a European cavalry line. They fight like a swarm. They dart in, throw, vanish, turn, hit again. They don't want a fair fight. They want you to get frustrated, and when you get frustrated, you chase. And when you chase, you break formation, and when you break formation, you die. So the cavalry clashes, dust blooms, hooves hammer the earth, and then the cavalry disappears off to the sides, chasing, looping, dragging the fight away from the infantry center. If you're a Roman infantryman, you don't know what's happening out there. You just hear distant thunder and screams, and you keep pushing, because stopping means dying. Then time stretches. This is the part no painting shows. The part where men fight for so long their arms feel like stone. The part where your mouth is so dry you can't swallow. The part where the sun cooks the top of your helmet and the heat makes you dizzy. And still you shove. This is where Hannibal is dangerous. Because Hannibal can smell exhaustion. He can sense the moment a line is about to become a crowd. He wants the Roman center to lose its shape. He wants them to push too hard, to surge, to create gaps, because gaps are where Hannibal lives. But Scipio keeps the line tight, not tight like a packed crowd, tight like a machine. And that's when the cavalry returns, not from the front, from behind Hannibal, the exact nightmare Hannibal created at Cannae. Only now, Hannibal is the one inside the closing room. Imagine the sick realization in the Carthaginian line as they hear hooves and shouting behind them. Imagine veterans, men who thought they'd seen every trick, suddenly understanding that the world has flipped. Now the Roman line surges because they sense it. They feel the enemy's posture change. The Carthaginians are still fighting forward, but their eyes are turning back. Their formation loosens, and when a formation loosens, it dies. The encirclement tightens, This is the revenge, not revenge as emotion, revenge as geometry. Hannibal's masterpiece at Cannae was a perfect trap. At Zama, Scipio builds a trap out of discipline and patience and lets Hannibal walk into it. The Carthaginian line begins to collapse inward, not instantly, slowly, like a building failing floor by floor. Men on the edges get hit first. They try to pivot. They can't. The center keeps pushing, unaware the sides are dying. Then someone screams, and the scream spreads like fire. And in that moment, even veterans can break. Because ancient armies aren't machines. They're human beings connected by fear and momentum. And when the momentum turns, it turns fast. Eventually, Hannibal does what he almost never has to do. He retreats. Not a rout, not a panic, a controlled withdrawal of whatever he can save. But the damage is done. The myth is broken. Hannibal, the invincible nightmare of Italy, has been beaten. Now we get to the part history likes to clean up with polite language. Because the battle doesn't end when the fighting ends. The battle ends when the consequences arrive. Carthage sends envoys, and this is where Rome's trauma speaks through policy. They don't just demand money, they demand submission. They strip Carthage of its empire. They take its fleet. They restrict its war-making ability, putting a leash on a once great power. Because Rome is not interested in forgiveness. Rome is interested in never feeling Cannae again. Now let's talk about what this victory actually means. Zama doesn't just end a war. It decides who controls the Western Mediterranean. It decides whether Rome becomes a regional power or the foundation of a global empire. And it does something darker. It teaches Rome that brutality works, that patience works, that if you suffer long enough and stay organized, you can outlast monsters. But here's the warning nobody likes to say out loud. When you defeat a monster by becoming colder, harder, and more disciplined, you don't go back to being who you were. Rome didn't just avenge Cannae. Rome was changed by Cannae. And Zama proves it. Now there's a famous idea people love, whether Scipio and Hannibal met before the battle, whether they tried diplomacy, whether Hannibal looked at the young Roman and saw his own reflection. Even if the details blur with time, the truth underneath is still powerful. Two minds, two generals, two men shaped by the same war, one trying to keep Carthage alive, the other trying to make sure Rome never bleeds like that again. And Rome wins, so Scipio becomes a legend. They call him Africanus, a title carved from the soil of the enemy's homeland. And Hannibal becomes something else, a warning, because Hannibal doesn't die at Zama. He survives. He becomes a ghost that haunts politics, alliances, and fear for years. And Rome never stops thinking about him. Even in victory, they can't fully relax. Because that's what trauma does. It teaches you the lesson, and then keeps teaching it forever. Now zoom out from the battlefield and look at the deeper story Zama is telling. It's not just Rome wins because Rome is good. It's Rome wins because Rome adapts, and because Rome is willing to pay the cost. They draft generations, they tax, they sacrifice, they refuse surrender even when surrender would be rational. And that stubbornness, this is the uncomfortable part, becomes Rome's superpower. That's why the title says brutally avenged, because vengeance isn't just a feeling, it's a program, it's policy. It's training your soldiers not to flinch when elephants scream at them. It's building lanes in a battle line so terror can run through without breaking you. It's making Hannibal the architect of Cannae, feel the walls closing in the way Rome once did. And at the very end, after the dust settles, there's a silence that feels almost supernatural, because both sides understand the same thing. A chapter of history has closed. Carthage will never be the same. Rome will never be the same either. Rome has learned how to win wars of exhaustion, and once a state learns that skill, it starts looking at the world differently, not as neighbors, as future provinces. Now here's the final irony, the part that makes Zama feel like a warning, not just a triumph. Rome didn't become an empire because it loved conquest. It became an empire because it learned to fear defeat. Cannae taught Rome that survival requires control. Zama gave Rome the confidence to start chasing control everywhere. And that combination, fear plus victory, is one of the most dangerous chemicals in human history. So when you hear Battle of Zama, don't just picture elephants and spears. Picture a traumatized republic with a knife in its teeth. Picture a young man forcing senators to swear loyalty at sword point. Picture a war that turned discipline into religion. And picture Hannibal, for the first time in his life, realizing the thing he taught Rome is the thing that finally kills his dream. Because that's what Zama is. Not just victory, inheritance. Rome inherited Hannibal's methods, Hannibal's mindset, and Hannibal's understanding that the battlefield was as much about psychology as it is about steel. And Rome used that inheritance to build a future that would swallow the Mediterranean whole. If you made it this far, you're a real history enthusiast. Please verify your subscription. It genuinely helps keep these kinds of long-form, story-driven episodes alive. And check out the next video on the screen, where we explore what happened after Zama, how Rome's victory didn't end violence. It simply moved the violence outward, into a world that had no idea what kind of machine had just been created. I'll see you there.